All right, Feast, talk to me about Baltimore. What do you think about them in the preseason?
Baltimore Ravens, I had them coming out at 9-8. They finished at 8-9. I was not nearly as high on them as you were coming into the season, just because of what I've been seeing year in and year out after the explosion of Lamar Jackson. I know people are like, oh, it's disrespectful to say teams have figured him out. Teams have maybe not so much figured him out numbers-wise. I mean, he's still getting his stats when he's actually playing.
Right. But
figuring him out is more so they've figured out how to contain him enough to beat him.
Right.
Like that's all you're ultimately trying to do. I mean, that's what I need to do is win the game. I don't have to stop you from rushing for 100. I don't have to stop you from throwing for 300. If you don't do both in the game and we win, that's a win. So that's figuring out. So, I mean, I'm giving Baltimore a C for the season overall, and their grade would be much lower than a C if they didn't have to deal with so many injuries. I mean, Lamar Jackson came out this season. They started really strong. I mean, they lost that gut-wrenching game to start the season in Vegas, which I knew they would lose because the Raiders were going to win their first game with fans in that stadium. They didn't stand a chance, and it was a tight game. But after that, they started 5-1. So, I mean, the Ravens looked like they were rolling. I mean, your prediction looked like it was on point at that point. I mean, then Lamar just straight up got banged up. I mean, just like I told you earlier, they lost their last 6 games of the season.
Yeah, that's absolutely nuts. Looking back on
Lamar missed 4 of those games, and he lost one of them. Well, he lost 2 of them that he actually started in. I mean, they did play very good teams. Their schedule got tough towards the end of the season, but it's inexcusable for you to just lose 6 straight. But for you to finish the season at 8-9 after losing 6 in a row, clearly, like you missed something halfway along the road, and that something that you missed was Lamar. I mean, they easily could have been, I only gave them 1 more win than what they got, but they could have easily been at least a 10-win team had Lamar been healthy. So, I mean, as far as what they need moving into the next season, they need to protect Lamar. I mean, that might mean that they need to change their schemes a little bit so they stop putting him in a position where he gets hit so much, but he needs more skill position players. They've got to get wide receivers and running backs in there that can produce and make big plays that aren't named Lamar. Teams are like, hey, no one else on this field can beat us. Like, we're going to go ahead and just sit back. We'll try to make him throw. If he does run, we're going to put a hat on him. Hit him every time. Like, they're making him pay for the explosive plays, and they're not allowing him to beat them like that. I mean, clearly his backup he's not up to scruff. We're talking about he's got to come in and do what Lamar's doing. Lamar's completely carrying the entire football team. Like, the Baltimore Ravens need more on offense.
Yeah.
All the way around. I mean, they've got Andrews. I mean, yeah, you've got a good tight end.
Right.
Outside of that, I need more running backs. Like, your running back room is nothing.
Right.
You need more wide receivers. Hollywood Brown is not it. Nope. He's good, but he's not it.
Right.
You need some more top flight guys. Somebody to actually scare an opposing defense. Make them actually play a softer coverage. If you gave Lamar more space, he might go for 100 yards a game.
Yep.
But no one has to do that.
Right.
It's like the Baltimore Ravens need to modernize their offense because it's actually it's starting to look like they're Georgia Tech.
Ooh, Georgia Tech college offense in the NFL. Man, Fees, we're going to have some Ravens fans on our heads, but hey, that's what we're trying to do. Call into the show. No callers yet. 678-871-9602, 678-871-9602. We are in the middle of the AFC North postseason wrap-up, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the Baltimore Ravens here. So a little bit of my preseason peek in here. So I did have them going 12-5. I did say Lamar Jackson must lead them on a playoff run, but I did also mention that it will all depend on him learning to throw the football more, which, again, through the first 11 games of the season, there was a narrative that we had here on Petty Sports at the beginning of that season, and it was, what is Lamar Jackson doing this week that we said he couldn't do the week before, or that we said he couldn't do a season or 2 seasons ago? Like, that was the narrative of Lamar Jackson. And go back and look at all the Ravens breakdowns that we had, whether it was a game review or the preseason predictions, whatever it was. Well, not the preseason, excuse me, but a lot of the in-season content when we talked about Baltimore. For that first few 11 games, we said a lot. What is Lamar doing that he has not been over the last few years? And I also mentioned that the Ravens majorly need a receiving core. I don't know if many people remember this. They were 31st in the NFL last year next to the New York Jets in passing yards per game. Absolutely horrible. Did not move all year. So clearly Lamar struggled to throw the football. The receivers had problems getting open. They did not have any passing presence on this team really for most of the season, in 2021. Well, 2022, 2021, excuse me. Talking about a grade for the Baltimore Ravens, I did want to be a little harsh on them, maybe kind of in the D category, but I am going to give them a C+ at this moment because I know they dealt with a lot of injuries in the backfield. I know they dealt with a lot of injuries in the secondary. And when you have, literally, when you think about Baltimore, for me, the first two things I think about is running game and defensive culture. They run the football well, and they clearly know how to suffocate you on the defensive side of the ball. When you're talking about Marlon Humphrey going out, when you're talking about other secondary players going out, when you're talking about literally a Gus Edwards, a J.K. Dobbins, God, wasn't there like a third? Was there a third running back that tore ACL? I think it was Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and then I think, say it again?
Did they bring in Murray?
They brought in Latavius Murray, former Saint and Viking. But yeah, and then I want to say Marlon Humphrey as well obviously had a really nasty injury. So they had a couple of key injuries within that franchise. So I couldn't be necessarily hard on them because, most of them were key players, let's just be real. So I will stick with a C+ grade there. And when I talk about the biggest need for Baltimore coming next year, not only wide receiver, of course, but let's talk about the secondary. Let's talk about the fact that the secondary for a decent part of the season was no joke. Dead last. A Baltimore Ravens secondary was dead last in the NFL in passing yards allowed per game. 32nd on their cornerbacks and safeties for that point in the NFL. And that was extremely disappointing to see because, again, year in and year out, we know that if you get anything with Baltimore, at least before the Lamar Jackson era, it was two things. They know how to run the football, and they know how to play defense. They clearly have a defensive culture at that point in the franchise. And again, they always have. We can look back through the years. We know to expect that from Baltimore.